Most people picture Minnesota two ways: lakes and cold. A place where people wave to strangers and leave their doors unlocked, where the winters are long but the people are warm. But Minnesota has another face. Beneath those frozen lakes, inside those dark northern woods, within the walls of places that time has tried and failed to forget, something lingers. Tonight we pull 5 of those secrets into the light. This is the Horror Expo, and this is 50 States of Terror. Tonight, Minnesota. The Woman in Green, First Avenue Nightclub, Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you've ever been to Minneapolis, you know First Avenue, one of the most iconic music venues in the country. The stage where Prince became a legend, where the walls are covered in stars honoring the artists who've played there. But before the music, before the crowds, this building was a Greyhound bus depot, and during World War II, it was the last stop for heartbreak. A young woman came there every day during the war. She'd stand in that depot and watch soldiers pour off the buses, watch wives and mothers cry and hold their men tight. She was waiting for hers. He never came back. The story, passed down through decades, says she walked into the woman's restroom wearing a green jacket and never walked out. The building changed, the buses stopped rolling, music moved in, but she stayed. For decades, workers at First Avenue have reported the same things: crying echoing from an empty stall, screams that cut through the music above, and worst of all, a full-bodied apparition in the woman's bathroom. A woman in a green jacket, standing perfectly still, staring. Multiple witnesses, multiple decades, this same green jacket, every time. Some say you can still see a noose around her neck. Staff has warned each other for years, don't go into that bathroom alone at night, especially not the 5th stall. She's still there, still wearing green, still waiting for someone who will never arrive. The Milford Mine, Crosby, Minnesota, February 5th of 1924. 14 men descended nearly 200 feet beneath the ground for a regular morning shift at the Milford Mine, just north of Crosby on the Kuyana Iron Range. They knew those tunnels. They knew every shaft, every sound the earth made when it settled. They had no reason to believe this morning would be different. What they didn't know was that Foley Lake, sitting directly above them, had been quietly eating through the ground between them and it. When the ground gave way, it gave way all at once. Millions of gallons of freezing water and mud came roaring through the tunnel walls. The miners had seconds, maybe less. Survivor Matt Kangas later recalled the moment the wall of water hit him, his lamp going out, the darkness, the cold. He ran blind, fell, grabbed the ladder, and climbed. He made it out, but most didn't. Of the 48 men who went down that morning, only 7 came back. 41 never saw daylight again. It remains the deadliest mining disaster in Minnesota history. The last body wasn't recovered for 9 months. But the story doesn't end there. After the mine was eventually pumped out and reopened, the newer workers started hearing something they couldn't explain. Deep underground, in the same tunnels where 41 men drowned, they heard a whistle. Not just any whistle. The whistle of Clinton Harris, the miners' foreman, who died on February 5th, 1924. Harris had used that whistle to signal his men, to warn them, to keep them safe. And now, 200 feet underground, in the dark, new workers claimed they could hear it still. Some refused to go back down. The Milford Mine Memorial Park still stands near Crosby today, and visitors report it even now, a sound beneath their feet like a whistle carried up through the earth. The foreman still trying to bring his men home. Crazy Annie's Bridge, 270th Street, Henderson area, Minnesota. Not every haunting needs a famous building. Sometimes evil settles into the most ordinary of places. A bridge on a back road, a creek, a tree. The locals around Henderson know the bridge at 270th Street by a different name. They call it Crazy Annie's Bridge. They don't go there after dark. The story centers around a woman called Annie who lived nearby during World War I. Her husband went to war, he didn't come home. Whether he died overseas or simply never returned, the story shifts in the telling. What it agrees on is what Annie did next. She drowned her 3 children in the creek beneath the bridge. Then she climbed a tree and hanged herself. Visitors who've gone to that bridge after dark describe what can only be called a sustained assault on the senses. Ungodly screams rising from the tree line, pale faces floating in the darkness between the trees, figures moving through the woods at speeds that don't make sense. But the detail that sticks with most people, the one they can't explain away, is the handprints. Visitors who stop at the bridge and return to their vehicles find handprints pressed into the exterior of their cars. Multiple sets, including the small, unmistakable prints of children's hands. No one touched the car, no one was there, but the prints are there. Ghost hunters, paranormal investigators, and curious locals have all made the drive out to 270th Street. Most report the same thing, a suffocating sense of dread the moment they arrive, and the feeling, long after they leave, that something came with them. Crazy Annie's Bridge doesn't have a Wikipedia page, it doesn't have a TV special, but the people who've been there don't need one. They got back in their cars, looked at those little handprints on the glass, and drove away as fast as they could. Falls State Hospital in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, opened 1890 and closed in 2008. There is a building in Fergus Falls that stops you cold the moment you see it. It sprawls nearly a quarter mile across the landscape. Gothic towers, ornate brickwork, hundreds of windows starting out like hollow eyes. The Fergus Falls State Hospital was built in 1890, designed around the compassionate vision of Dr. Thomas Kirkbride, who believed the mentally ill could be healed if treated in the right environment. Light, fresh air, space, dignity. It was, for its time, an act of mercy. Over its 118 years of operation, tens of thousands of psychiatric patients lived within those walls. Many were committed against their will, many never left, not as patients, but as the dead. In the cemetery at the edge of the property, more than 3,000 people are buried. Most of the graves are marked not with names, but with numbers. The hospital closed in 2008. The buildings have stood empty since, and whatever was left inside has not been quiet. Paranormal investigators granted access to the facility have captured EVP recordings throughout the building that sound unmistakably like voices asking for help, disembodied, urgent, in rooms that contain nothing but dust. The underground tunnel network that connects the buildings is described by every investigator who's entered it the same way. Oppressive, disorienting, and alive with cold spots that move, that seem to follow. From the outside, visitors report seeing figures in the upper floor windows of sealed buildings. Movement behind the glass in rooms that hold nothing. When investigators enter to check, the floor is undisturbed, the room empty, no one there. The city has sealed the hospital, tours were shut down, the buildings are deteriorating, and some may be demolished. But 3,000 people buried with numbers instead of names are not going quietly. They were forgotten once. They are making certain, one way or another, it doesn't happen again. The Wendigo, the North Woods of Minnesota. Everything we've talked about tonight has a location, a building, a bridge, a mine. This one is different. This one lives in the forest, in the cold, in the hunger that a long winter carves into you, and it doesn't stay in one place, it follows you. The Wendigo comes from the oral tradition of the Ojibwe and the Algonquian peoples, indigenous nations whose territory has spanned the great northern forests of Minnesota for centuries. The legend describes something born from an act of desperation, a human being who, trapped in a brutal winter with nothing left to eat, resorts to cannibalism. In doing so, they cross a line that cannot be uncrossed. The humanity burns away. What emerges is 15 feet tall, skeletal despite its hunger, skin pulled tight over its bones, eyes glowing in the dark, and radiating a smell of rot and decay. The Wendigo's hunger is never satisfied. It devours, and the starvation only deepens. It is the embodiment of winter's cruelty, the thing that happens to a person when survival costs them their soul. But this wasn't merely a story told around fires. The brutal winters of early Minnesota, cold beyond what most of us can imagine. Stranded settlers and indigenous communities alike. There were documented cases of people resorting to cannibalism. And in some of those cases, the men who survived the winter came back, well, changed. Still craving it. Still hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. Among some indigenous communities, there developed a tradition of Wendigo hunters, people tasked with stopping those who had crossed that threshold before they could harm others. The most documented of these hunters was a Cree man named Jack Fiddler. By the early 1900s, Fiddler claimed to have stopped 14 Wendigos. His final act, in 1907, was the killing of a Cree woman he believed was mid-transformation. He and his son were arrested and tried for murder. Their defense was not that she was mentally ill, not that she was sick. Their defense was that she was becoming a Wendigo, that had to be stopped before she consumed her own family. Jack Fiddler died before the trial ended. His son was convicted. The court had no framework for what they were describing. Sightings in the North Woods of Minnesota continue to this day, towering figures between the trees, footprints in the snow too large, too deep, and too far apart for any known animal. Campers who describe a circling presence in the dark and a smell they can't identify, something like rot, something like cold, something like hunger. The Ojibwe word for Wendigo translates, in one interpretation, as evil spirit that devours mankind, in another, simply, cannibal. In the deep Minnesota winter, in the woods where the trees go on forever and the light dies at 4 in the afternoon, both translations feel equally real. It is in those woods that something still hungers, something that was once a person, something that remembers what it costs to survive. So, 5 stories, 1 state. A woman still waiting in a bathroom stall, wearing green. 41 men at the bottom of a flooded mine, with their fireman's whistle still echoing in the dark. 3 children's handprints pressed cold into the steel of a stranger's car. 3,000 numbered graves, and voices in the empty halls above them asking for help. And somewhere out in the North Woods, something ancient and hungry, and impossibly patient. Minnesota is lakes and cold and warmth and hot dishes and people who hold the door for you. It is also this. Every place has 2 faces. Tonight, you saw the other one. This was the Horror Expo, and we're just getting started. 50 states, 50 stories, every single one of them real.